welcome. In the last year, you may have heard this term, Web 3.0. And if, like me, you wondered, what's this all about? Then this show is for you. I'm Meloni Bhatt, and welcome to Crypto TV, presented by CoinSwitch Kuber. Here we demystify crypto and its universe. So today we are going to speak about or try to understand what is Web 3.0. Is it a reinvention of the internet as we know it? How will it impact how we work, play, interact? Is it the digital utopia with the big middlemen, the big tech companies out of the way? Or is it just a fancy term to something that is still up in the air? Well, whatever it is, Web3 is driving new conversations and investments. And to help us understand Web 3.0, we have with us Pranav Sharma. He's the founding partner at Woodstock Fund. Woodstock is an emerging technology fund house currently focused on investments in blockchain and distributed ledger technology. Pranav Sharma is an MBA and mechanical engineer by training. As an entrepreneur and venture capitalist, his expertise ranges across a spectrum that includes traditional finance, sales, mergers and acquisitions, SME insurance, venture capitalism, etc. And since 2016, he's been working closely with those involved with decentralized technologies. Pranav, welcome to the show.
Hi, Melanie. Thank you very much for this amazing opportunity, and always excited to share how I can probably demystify in my own simple ways, hopefully simple enough.
Yeah, and simple really being the thrust over here. So Pranav, let's get started. But before we get into this whole Web 3.0, it'd be good for us to know that what is Web 1, what is Web 2.0? Can you explain that to us?
I think there are multiple ways of putting it, but there was a very interesting, you can say, a slide, or let's say a picture that I saw in the morning. And basically it showed that Web 1.0 was all about a username and a password. Web 2.0 was about, clicking through Facebook, Google, and sort of, getting into your, respective websites. And Web 3 is about connecting a wallet. So it's interesting, how different people, put it all together. But I think, Melanie, you explained this very well in a different way when you introduced, me, that this is all of the above. This is about creating a space in which the creators can express a lot more. Creator could be developers, entrepreneurs, and they could be sitting anywhere in the world, just plugged into the internet, creating those stellar applications which are going to be transformative, which are going to solve for the problems of tomorrow. And that kind of a utopia in many ways, and that kind of a liberal space is what Web 3.0 is all about. That how do you move away from certain playbooks and recipes and give power back to the people so that they can create their own playbooks and recipes. And then that further, increases innovation, collaboration on scale, and of course the liquidity and the investments, follow suit. And then those, large applications, get built on the internet.
This is a natural progression of the web, Pranav, or is it something that will make the current web that we're in obsolete?
I think this is a natural progression. I mean, look at it this way. I mean, we as humanity go into cycles. I mean, so on one end of the spectrum, we like significant control because it gives us guidance, it gives us conformity, it gives us a structure to grow, etc. And on the other side, we seek freedom, right? And this freedom is about how we can be more boundaryless, how we can be much more, you can say, collaborative, etc. So there's always this tension which is there. I think the current tension is about how we can break the shackles and express a lot more, include a lot more, and create those applications. So a very simple answer to your question is that it's a progression because we are moving into a more borderless and boundaryless kind of a space. So many of the Web 2 applications, will become more, those which can become more boundaryless and more borderless will probably succeed in Web 3 as well. And in Web 3, we'll see very interesting applications emerge, which would be definitely much more collaborative, much more borderless and boundaryless.
Web 3.0 is not here as yet. We're getting there.
We are getting there. And if you look at it this way, my personal opinion is that Web 3 is a journey and less of a destination. Because if somebody lands up coining Web 4.0, Web 5.0, I mean, definitely we can get into jargons and, lingos, etc. But the way Web 3, where we see is it is like an open space in which, we are creating our, future in many ways because technology is an enabler here. And, those applications which are necessary for the consumer-centric world to emerge is something that we are creating. Now, if somebody says I'm creating a consumer-centric world, I am getting into this technology, these are not definitive spaces. These are evolving spaces. So I see Web3 will emerge into something much more different from what we see today. And it's going to be, very powerful because it's going to give power back to the users.
You speak about giving people the power back, and I'm sure you'll explain that, as we kind of go along in the conversation. But one of the terms that people conflate with Web 3.0 is the metaverse. How are the two linked and how are the two different?
So here, I mean, when we say metaverse, in my opinion, it's something that became a popular lingo with Facebook changing its name to Meta. So, but having said that, in the space, especially in blockchain slash crypto space, whatever you call it, people have been speaking about metaverse for a long period of time. And I have a different argument here. My argument is that ever since the first SMS, happened, we started stepping into metaverse, or let's say probably the first Motorola, you can say, that pager came into being because we started giving finite time to the virtual space. And even if when we are having this conversation on a, let's say, a recording or as a television or a Zoom call, what we are visualizing is a 3D image in our mind, right? So in a way, we are already living into that space, which is not real, right? So in many ways, metaverse is about experiencing the virtual space as more real than the real world, right? And creating things which are the right, which are in your experience, the things that you want to experience a lot more. And if something like this can be done in a very virtual space wherein you have more immersive experiences, so AR, VR, media, and a bunch of other things, then this will become a real metaverse in many ways for many people. But all I can say is that we are already in metaverse. It's just a question of getting there from a visualization perspective.
But for Web 3.0, then are you saying that we will need new hardware and software to participate in it? And if that is the case, then does it not leave people out?
I mean, hardware has become so cheap. Look at Moore's law. I mean, it has made chipsets, practically the phones that we carry in our pockets. These are much more powerful devices than those clunky mainframes which were there earlier. And I'm sure these phones will also be called clunky 2 to 3 years down the line, as probably there are some embedded technologies or some things that we'll wear or something that we'll carry in our body or something on. We really don't know where we are going to push the boundaries and where we are going to go eventually. But the point I'm making here is that right now there's a distinguishing force between the hardware and the software, right? And the human. But probably at a certain point, those boundaries would also be merged in many ways. So the point I'm making here is that when you are talking about experiential possibilities, those experiential possibilities, as we know, maybe somebody may be thinking that, hey, if this is metaverse, this is going to be Oculus. But maybe this is going to be some embedded uh, something, and which is going to make this experience, much more real. So we really don't know where we are getting into. This is all imagination. Is also the boundaries of the physical hardware and the technology and semiconductor technology, especially how far it takes us. But all I can say is when I look far out and not really make a prediction for like 3 years, but let's say maybe 10 years down the line, we're getting into a space wherein we can literally click and experience that kind of a world that we want to experience, and that's where we are heading as a humanity.
Pranav, I think one of the big problems that critics have is essentially with this, the fact that it is nebulous. It feels out there. It doesn't feel something, which is concrete. And that is one of the criticisms with Web 3.0. Many people say that, hey, this is just, some made up thing. It does not really exist. What would you say to that?
So I think it's a fair criticism, and it's very important to have, you can say, fair criticism so that the boundaries are challenged. That's how I see this. Now let's look at what is already there, right? And so definitely we have something like a Bitcoin, which is fairly independent of any central authority. Something like this was never really envisioned. I mean, of course, it was envisioned by maybe an individual or a bunch of people, but it was not something which was collectively envisioned by governments or individuals, in different in organizations, etc. So we have something like that. We have a market wherein, let's say, there are a bunch of applications which are providing different services to this entire space, what we call as cryptocurrency space, or we can call it Web 3.0, right? And these, a lot of these are very profitable startups, which have become enterprises. Exchanges like Coinbase have become listed on, I would say, it's not like they got listed on one of the smaller the countries. It has happened in, let's say, US, right? There are custody solutions, there are compliant, payment gateways, etc. So basically, the rails have already emerged of something like this. Similarly, so this is, I'm just looking at it purely from a liquidity slash incentive slash cryptocurrency angle perspective, which people may still, say that this is speculative. But the point is that there is a large enough market which is irreversible right now. And the second part of it is that many of these applications have built rails with the traditional institutions, whether they are enterprises, whether they are banks, and all of these are like irreversible, you can say, structures. Especially when you go to US, you see that the kind of action that has happened with almost all the large banks, Visa, MasterCard, etc., participating into this. I mean, they won't do this, without having necessary approvals within their system, and not understanding the implications of what they're going to do, etc. In a lot of countries, merchants are accepting payments in this space. So there is one rail which is already getting set up. The second rail is that around the NFT. Now, NFT, when it started off, it was more about, it became a frenzy for a while, etc. And maybe the jury's out that it's still a frenzy, but the point is that eventually the creators don't really get their due. And how do you give creators their due? Probably technology is the best solution. And if you take that conjecture forward, then essentially what blockchain is doing is that it is not only empowering the creators to have their due, but also finding a way that how that benefit can be passed on to them even when the creation sort of outlives their life, or creation passes on from one hand to another. And this kind of system never really existed. I mean, think about a situation that Picasso could have done these paintings out of passion, but did he really financially benefit? I really don't know about the data point, but I'm sure that his family did not financially benefit. Probably his grandson did. Maybe he did not. Most probably he did not. Now the thing is that probably with use of technology, you can find a way that the entire generation and the set of people can benefit, and you can bequeath, and you can also pass on legacies of these assets over multiple generations with absolute ease with the click of a button. So there are multiple things which are already getting into place. These are, and one should look at this not like a sequence of pieces which are getting into place, but more like a jigsaw puzzle wherein various pieces are coming together. And so it is very important that somebody who's looking at Web 3.2 literally zooms back for a while and zooms in into specific pieces and sort of pictures it all together and sees that which are the missing pieces, and gets either involved or invest in whatever capacity or builds one. And so in a way, it's like collectively we are building the future of tomorrow in our own imagery.
All right. Sounds exciting, and it's great that there are people like you who can zoom in and look at what's missing, pick up where we need to, and really make it a better place for everyone. But I'm going to touch upon that, whether it is going to be inclusive a little bit later. So currently we interface with the web through platforms, with websites, right? So what happens to tech giants like a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook in 3.0?
I think they will evolve for sure. I mean, they're just waiting for the tipping point to cross. And just to put it into perspective, let's say if you talk about Facebook, they've already taken a decision there, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to Google and Apple, they're just literally waiting for various, my sense is regulations, to clear regulations to emerge, because they're too big to fail and they're too big to experiment in many ways. So I think once the regulations come, they will immediately switch. So for them, it is a switch button, on. And once they're on, they're like fully on with their entire lock, stock, barrel machinery. So many of these, organizations, and many of them, also interact with us. We see that they are very receptive. They're very open. None of them rejects Web3. All of them see that, it makes sense to them, right? And they want to participate. They're just waiting for the right tipping point wherein they can start participating in a very meaningful way. So my sense is just a matter of time, and I'm sure they would have already taken the decisions. They're just waiting for some check in the boxes to happen before they can jump in, lock, stock, barrel.
Right. And I want to go right to the point of regulation. So government oversight is one of the big issues, which is confronting the crypto and blockchain ecosystem. Now, right now, the blockchain-based tokens are, sort of in a regulatory black hole. But that could all change as soon as administrations begin the process of setting up the new rules. Now, how do you think this will play out for Web 3.0?
So one thing is that regulations will always be catching up. And the reason here is because, as we discussed earlier, these are like open frameworks. Now, how can you regulate something which is, in your own words, like nebulous, or let's say open framework, wherein people are, and the speculative aspect is because people are finding the right kind of applications, and there's a lot of dabbling which is going on, etc. Right? So it's very difficult to regulate, and in that sense, definitely licensing, sandbox, creating spaces for anti-money laundering, especially FATF guidelines. I think focusing a lot more on consumer protection, systemic risk, which can happen to nations, especially those countries and those currencies which have some sort of capital account convertibility issues. So I think all of these things will play a massive role in decision making on the regulation side. So it's not going to be one size fit all. It's going to be every country is going to find their own way of regulating this. So anybody who is thinking that there's going to be one fine day of some extremely clean, crisp regulatory document like a 4-page dossier coming out, and this is going to be like we are all going to go to the metaverse highway. I don't think that's going to happen. And even all I can say is that there is a lot of all I can add on the regulatory side is that there's no point in thinking of regulators versus us. It is about finding a space in which we can build a shared journey as to how we can make, let's say, a country like India, for example, future ready. And I think that is very, very important to happen. I don't see too many conversations around how do we make India future ready and how we can participate responsibly into these technologies. And if as we start having those dialogues, I'm sure right kind of regulations will emerge. Right now, the regulations are more about protecting the interest of the individuals or of the nation or of the state, etc. The future has to be more about those discussions and debates.
But now Web 3.0, as you yourself said, is centered around this permissionless open networks. So, and obviously, regulation, as you pointed out, or gatekeeping will be challenging, right? Like for instance, right now, though we go onto platforms like say Twitter, or Facebook or whatever, there is some sort of policing. For instance, policing of hate speech. But how will that happen in this open permissionless networks? Who will police this hate speech, cybercrime, fake news? Because there is no governing body right now. Who will pay these global data centers to serve content and stuff like that? So how does, I mean, we don't have any of it. And how will it really work then?
So Meloni, all I can say is that, what we are used to as a governance model right now is that there should be a regulator who should be watching over us, right?
Yeah.
Sort of used to that kind of a model, right? My personal view is that the best, you can say, governance is self-governance, right? So in many ways, things like ESG or sustainability, these conversations that we're having, a lot of people may brush them aside as nice to have conversations, but once we start focusing on inner compass, and once we start focusing on what is the right thing to be done for people, for the stakeholders who are around us, and I think and a lot of self-governance and collective governance emerges. A lot of these frameworks will emerge over a span of time, which will be self-propagating in many ways. So in many ways, when people are experimenting with DAOs, these DAOs experimentations are around, can we build self-governing sustainable enterprises, without actually having the structure of an entity in place. So these are good experimentations, and in many ways in the future, as multiple stakeholders are there and you want them to participate in a way that you don't want to have unnecessary conflict on things that don't really matter, but they are focused on the purpose and on the agenda, the technology is going to be a lot more used for governance. And my own perspective here is that when you look at larger organizations, how does the governance actually happen? Many times it is about the people who are the most influential or the most powerful or the most savvy are the people who are able to get things done, and those people who may be doing the right thing for all the stakeholders may not be heard as a voice, right? So I don't think there is a zone of perfect governance even in I would say a decentralized permissionless space. And even in centralized, space that we are used to, I think the answer lies somewhere in middle, and which starts with self-governance, goes to collective governance, and finding ways and means for people to participate, and in a way that the agenda or the purpose is not compromised, and we are able to take objective decisions. So I think technology is going to be a major enabler, and some sort of middle path will emerge over a span of time.
But self-governance essentially means self-policing. But there's a lot of stuff out there, where, and we're seeing this every day, especially when it comes to, hate crime or hate speech and fake news and stuff like that. People are just, there are websites, there are people who are just happy to propagate it and to bring out an alternative narrative and things like that. So don't you think you're placing too much, faith in self-governance? And do you think we are ready for it?
We are not ready for it. And I agree with you, we're not ready for it. But eventually, when you're talking about the current model of governance and the future model of governance, without self-governance, none of them is going to work. That is the point I was making there.
Right.
But the point I'm making about these fake news and everything else, that you're mentioning about, and confusion, chaos, and motivated narratives, etc. And there are multiple facets of it. Spurious transactions, multiple things are all about bad actors participating in ways and means that they distort the either the social fabric or the economic fabric. I think in this context, the blockchain has a much better solution, right? Because you can build systems in which people can participate and call out without by being anonymous, or by retaining their privacy, without getting into a situation wherein every time you expect a whistleblower to stand up and call out something which has already crossed the tipping point, right? So I think these systems, blockchain and associated systems, are very powerful from that point of view, and there are a lot of startups which are already focusing on how they can get most authentic news, or most authentic you can say merchandise being available without a person in the middle. So this is exactly the feature, and this is exactly the thing about blockchain. This is about traceability, right? And this is about fungibility, and so in that context, I think blockchain over a span of time will emerge as the base technology for reducing removing the fake and the counterfeit from the actual.
Okay, but then Pranav, will it make it any easy for anyone to gain access to my public and private information that I share online? If you can focus on how will issues around privacy play out, and will we be at risk?
So let's say if you have an on-chain data, right? I mean, the data is into a cell which is only accessible to you. Unless you engage with the centralized data, the data is not going to be shared with anyone. So in that sense, that privacy of your data is guaranteed. So privacy and anonymity are two things that blockchain can give it to you, right? So the point I'm making here is that in any case, the regulations around privacy globally have evolved to a very high level, especially GDPR. Every country has privacy regulation. Even Indian regulations around privacy are also at par with global standards.
Yeah, they're tough.
It is just a question of what are the mechanisms we have to enforce them. And so many of these mechanisms don't exist in centralized systems. They're prone to hacking, they're prone to somebody having motivated interest, around various reasons. I, don't want to sound as if everything is negative about it. But the point I'm making here is that if you're able to use technology which containerizes it cryptographically, they could be and gives the data back to the user and give the user the power to consent to the use of that particular data. That, in my opinion, is a better way, and that is exactly what GDPR and the privacy law says, that essentially the decision of the private data to be available to a third party, the decision is only with the user or the data generator in that sense. So the technology is perfectly aligned towards making that happen.
And you think technology is aligned, you said, to make that happen? Okay. But supposing, hypothetically, if there is something that, someone puts out, someone somewhere didn't like it, do you think with enough leverage, the blockchain immutability, transparency, can that be used to track that post all the way back to the source? Is there a risk then of weaponizing blockchain for surveillance tech, for instance?
And and probably this is exactly the question that we don't discuss in most of these conversations. And people discuss about money laundering and traceability, etc. Actually, this is the real question, which is about the traceability goes so far that technically it puts it takes the power back from the user in some ways if this is not done with absolute responsibility. So I do agree that surveillance can become an issue if let's say the traceability on the blockchain is not done in the right way. I recently met with somebody and he was mentioning that forget about blockchain, all the transactions are easily visible, whether you're anonymous, whether you're using any privacy coins or whatever it is, they're all visible. But I mean, and they can be traced back, etc. And most of the assets are recovered. So there have been very limited instances wherein the assets have been washed and lost forever. Most of the assets have been recovered, so far. The real issue is with the, you can say, the banking system and the real world, where you can say there's a lot of leakage which is out there. So I think surveillance is going to be a very popular area of conversation and debate. As so initially it is about anonymity and privacy, but once the privacy is revealed, which is irreversible, then the veil is gone, and then the data can be tracked. So I'm sure a lot of these regulations will be enforced, and that is where I think the judiciary and the regulations will step in to protect the interest of the consumer over a span of time. But this is a good problem to have. The point I'm making is that this is a good problem to have, because at least there'll be a space in which the user has the option of revealing the identity or their information going out, and them having a recourse by actually going to the relevant agencies to solve for these issues.
I mean, the whole point is that, Web 3.0 gives me the control to keep my information private. But supposing if it can be unearthed, as you say, can go right up to the last mile, and then, maybe I'm a whistleblower putting something out which is in public interest, but someone with enough leverage is able to, get back to me and stifle that conversation. You feel that regulation will match up to being able to protect people in such a scenario?
I think there are two things. One is that you can always create another identity, and you can always do this. People do this today also. They create fake accounts, etc. I mean, there you can create like avatars or whatnots. And so the point I'm making is that I don't think that will limit people from participation, and they can create identities over a span of time. I don't think that's that's going to be a major issue. But one thing is for sure that our frameworks are very robust in terms of catching violations, especially when they are in a certain format. So this is the easy part, in my opinion, that the relevant structures will emerge to protect that citizen in case for whatever reason their identity is revealed and they're into a difficult situation. So I'm like very sure that because this will create otherwise a big crisis for consumer protection, because there'll be enough data points for the consumer to call out that their interests are not protected, and none of the democracies would be want to be labeled as a autocracy. So I'm just putting it out that this is if let's say there is evidence, then the evidence can also be turned around in the court of law, and it can also put various other major stakeholders also at risk of reputation. And so this is a good problem to have. And once we reach that point, it will further tighten the privacy laws to ensure that the privacy of the user strengthens. So it just closes the loop faster.
I want to shift course here, and talk about the funding. What people who are betting big on Web 3.0, a lot of them, venture capital firms, Indian and otherwise, like yours, they are betting big on Web 3.0 startups. We have reports that which came out in the Economic Times, that early stage Indian VC firm Antler, which is a unit of the Singapore-based venture capital platform, has committed to investing up to 150 million over the next 3 years in about 100 Indian startups, and about 50 million is committed to the Web 3.0 space. There was some data which said that in October 2021, VC firms had invested $600 million in Web 3.0. So, I think the point is that there is a lot of money which is flowing into technologies, emerging technologies. And this brings me to a point that the former Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey made to someone on Twitter, and he says that you don't really own Web 3.0; it is the VCs who own it. And he's argued that the crypto world is being purchased by traditional market investors and making the entire business centralized, rather than decentralized, which basically is what it's being made out to be. And venture capitalists are investing very heavily because they think that it's going to make them money, which leads to a lot of centralization. What are your thoughts on this?
So Maloney, I'll be very, you can say, honest here, and all I can say is that if we are going to get the Web 2 lens into Web 3, it's going to be a situation which is not going to enrich the community and get the community to participate. This is going to create many monoliths, right? So having said that, whatever Jack Dorsey mentioned and whatever Elon Musk sort of endorsed as a conversation and whatever happened in the aftermath, I like that conversation purely because at least that conversation matters, right? Otherwise, in a Web 2 context, that conversation doesn't matter, right? So because people expect somebody to make money when they invest into, you can say, Facebook very early on, there is this conversation irrelevant. So that means that people have, and there are a lot of Twitter, and it is not only you, but let's say almost in the entire world, everyone is having this conversation right now. So this is very good for soul searching, and this is also good for self-governance, and this is also good for governance of funds and so on and so forth. So even, for example, we as a fund, let's say if we have $1 million that we can put into a specific investment, we try to take a small slice, because this is not about us making whatever 10 20x or whatever it is into on that particular investment on that kind of money, and of course our LPs will love it for it. But from a success of a project perspective, it is important to have 3 4 other investors to come in to participate, and they could be from different you can say geographies or different USPs, which are very important for that particular business model to become successful as a network over a span of time, and sort of short circuit that journey as much as possible. So this is more about collaboration. Web3 is more about collaboration and less about, you can say, having your, you can say, becoming a sole player in many ways. So in that context,
but
sorry.
Pranav, some would say that is like hedging the risks, right?
So I'll put it this way, that initially it could be perceived as hedging of the risk, but it is also, I mean, nobody wants to invest into like 100 startups. It is just difficult to manage the portfolio and meet all their expectations. It is best to like manage into 20 30 startups, work deeply with them, etc. So technically risk management always is like a boundary, so in many ways, you don't want to cross the bell curve so that your tail becomes very long and it becomes very difficult to manage. So I think the point I'm making here is that this argument is real, that many of the VC funds, they have put in so much of money into many of these protocols, that many of these protocols look more centralized from an incentive perspective than they are supposed to be decentralized. The technology may be decentralized, but the protocols become centralized. But an argument here is that who else is there to bootstrap the liquidity of these large networks? Who else is there to support these large networks, right? The retail don't have the capacity at times to support this network. So many of the times, these early large chunkier investors come in so that, they can give the initial lift to the network to a certain point. But I do agree that this debate and this conversation is very meaningful and very important, because there's a very fine line between taking care of LP interest and ensuring that the community participates. So if the LP interests are taken care of at the cost of community participation, then it's a problem. That is what Jack Dorsey mentioned. But if there's a lot of soul searching within the fund, within the firms, within the individuals, that what is the fine line? Are we crossing the fine line? How we can calibrate ourselves backward? How we can work with like-minded funds, individuals, etc., so that we can further the space. That is the evolution that will happen. One thing which I did mention is that there may be few things which may have happened as missteps in this space, and I think these conversations are great. The more important point is that decentralization is a journey. It's not a destination. So if you are expecting that everything that is happening right now is perfect, there's nothing which is perfect out there. It is very important that these debates and these conversations happen, so that there is a alignment of the inner compass that happens, and we progress in a way that we are able to give the power back to the community over a span of time.
Yeah, and I think the reason why all of these conversations are happening, you mentioned one point, that right now Everyone expects some big shot out there to make the money, right? The expectation is really to move to a better space than we are in right now, to not be grappling with the same problems that we are grappling with right now, to hopefully solve some of them, so we can all collectively go to a better place. And this is something that I was speaking to John Devdas, who is the founding director of the Interwork Alliance, and the founder and president of NGD Enterprise. And he said that, for something to be really, really decentralized, truly decentralized, everyone must participate. And if unless everyone participates, you cannot really have that decentralization. So how do you think, how easy or difficult do you think will it be to get this universal buy-in by companies, by users, and everyone else into this blockchain-based internet?
So here I completely agree with John on this, and I think this is a journey. When I mentioned it is a journey, it is exactly this is what I mentioned. The technology is the easiest part. I mean, with due credit to the people who built the technology, it's phenomenal, and it keeps on evolving, etc. But the most difficult part is the social shift. And the social shift, I mean, even if you look at, let's say country like India, for example, how many people used to vote earlier? And the needle is shifting now. A large number of people vote, etc. And this is all a journey of awareness, and awareness of not only about your rights, but also about your obligations. And as you know, so when I was mentioning about self-governance, I was mentioning about how you become more aware of your rights and obligations in the context of what is your responsibility, and how do you exercise, freedom with responsibility. So I think once, these kind of, so that's why these conversations and debates are very important, because in many ways, for example, even for the audience, it gives them you can say seed of thought that okay, money making is one aspect, but the second part is how we can find a way to meaningfully participate into these networks. But otherwise they're going to be valuable dead networks. What is the point in creating these structures? So when John says that everyone has to participate, we have to find a way that what is my North Star? Why am I into this space? Am I into this space only to speculate and make money, or am I into this space to contribute and enrich the community? Am I here to build best of the startups? Am I here to support building best of the solutions which can solve for large scale problems? And that North Star, once it is figured out, it is important how do you meaningfully participate. And this space has enough incentive to enrich people who participate in the right context. So I do agree that right now it's a challenge, and the technology is ready, the social shift is happening, and this is going to probably take, when you're saying that how everyone goes on blockchain, I don't think there's a space in which everyone will be on blockchain. There'll be always 10-20% who will always be dismissive of this. But the question here is that from the early 5-10% adopters, how can this grow to, let's say, 60%? And the 60% will happen when affirmative regulations come into play, when the right kind of user experience is there of these applications, when these applications are able to be built in the right context in which people can participate meaningfully with absolute ease. And there's a little bit of a journey to be covered there. And I think the true value unlock of this space is yet to be discovered. So I think we are at least 2 to 3 years away from this.
2 to 3 years only, you feel, huh?
Yeah, that's my, because the best of the talent is here, Melanie, and they're just, even as we speak, they're building something so right now. And from their perspective, they have experienced the old world, or you can say the conventional world in many ways, and they have seen what's broken there, and they want to create things into the new imagery. So there's a lot of work which is happening behind the scenes into this space. And my own personal sense is that the early movers are the most difficult to come by. And once you reach the needle to, let's say, maybe 10%, 15% of those users coming in, then the shift of rest of next 20, 30, 40% of the users coming in is much more easier, because they look at the success of the early users. And that's
Right.
what happened with the Facebooks and various other networks and platforms that became successful over a span of time. So I think the more this is actually a point at which I'm glad all of these conversations around uh, you know uh, privacy, Web 3.0, and a bunch of other things are happening, because this is a catharsis period. Once this catharsis period is through, then it will be about enabling these journeys, and then subsequently rest of the other people participating as consumers.
Pranav, for you, I think you figured it out. It's in your head. You can see this journey. You can see the destination, and you're trying to fit the pieces into place. For you, the jigsaw puzzle is all kind of falling in. For the rest of us, we still have to figure it out. But thank you so much. This has been a very interesting conversation. As you said, Web 3.0 is based on the idea of taking control back. That individuals should be responsible for self custody of assets and also of services. It implies a greater set of responsibilities, but as you point out, also confers a larger degree of autonomy. But I still feel that on the other hand, there are questions that need thought. Who will own or control Web 3.0? Will it just be the investors who are pumping in money, or will it be Aam Janata? Uh, how will there be this kind of how will we regulate, say, for instance, cyber crimes or hate speech or harassment? But Pranav, thanks very much. Any last thoughts?
I'll say that this is a journey, and I think this journey will eventually happen. Just, the question is only when. So I'm very excited about this journey, and thank you very much for creating this platform, because these are probably one of the most amazing questions I have experienced over a long period of time. Kudos to you, and kudos to the entire team at EP for this entire show. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so very much for joining us. With this, everyone, it's a wrap, and we'll see you next time very soon.